Good morning, everybody. It's good to have you. If you're speaking, be sure that your microphone is on. If you're not, try to keep it off. Muted. It is the magic hour. So I'm going to ask Bev Vogel from Hillsborough to lead us in prayer, and then we'll moving on in our conversation. So Bev, please.
Father, we come before you today and we just thank you for who you are, for being the God of all creation, for knowing everything that is going on in our individual lives, in our family lives, and in the world around us. And we thank you for an opportunity to come before you today and meet together as a group. We ask, Father, that you would guide our conversation, that you would help us to hear you, to hear from you. We thank you for your word and how you teach us through that. I thank you, Father, for each person that has come together here through the United States and the world around us. And Lord, for Lynn, as he leads us, I pray that you would guide and direct him. Thank you again for who you are and for all that you've done, for all that you're going to do. We ask these things in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I expect that we'll continue to have people join us. We had 72 people register for this, so I imagine there's still some more coming. Forrest Jenin is pastor at Neighborhood Church, and I've asked him to lead off the conversation. They have more than 100 people that gather each weekend at Neighborhood, and so and they have a large staff as well. So they've been thinking a lot about how to respond to COVID-19, and he'll give us a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes of input in terms of what they're doing and why they're doing it. What is motivating them. Along the way, please feel free to use the chat feature, both for your own comments and questions. I expect that all of us are learners and all of us are experts to some extent on this thing. And I know that I assume that we're all experiencing different emotions. I've been pretty calm most of the time. And then this morning I had to do some deep breathing exercises because I realized I don't know where the food is going to come from after my refrigerator is empty. So, Forrest, please.
Well, hey everyone, can you hear me, Lynn? We good? Yep. Yeah, I certainly don't know that we have anything figured out. I was telling Lynn, I said there's a gap in the seminary's curriculum. There's no class for teaching how to lead a church through a global pandemic. So perhaps that needs to be added. Again, lead pastor.
Forrest, this is that class, right?
Yeah, this is that class. Yeah, then you have the wrong teacher. I think, and I think that's really been our approach thus far in the early days of this thing is there's no script, there's no book. We're innovating every step of the way, and to some degree we're not thinking short term at all. We're not even thinking like this is something that's gonna like go away, although it will, but we're thinking there's got to be some probably permanent shifts that are going to take place in how church is done, rooted in this. I know in California where we're located, they just, the governor didn't guarantee it, but pretty much said schools aren't coming back until the fall, and there's kind of stay where you are directives happening in our state. I mean, it's a pretty significant thing, and so we're not thinking short term. And in terms of how to communicate with our church, our attitude from starting last week has been daily. That we cannot think about how do we connect once a month or how do we connect once a week or twice a week, but how are we communicating every single day? And please feel free to interrupt me if you have a question. Because again, I'd love to hear what you guys are up to so that we can learn from you. But obviously we've taken church digital, we've taken everything digital, including our staff. If they want, there's still some staff going in and out of our church. We have decided, I mean, one of the things that we're doing is that we're providing childcare for first responders, doctors, nurses, essential personnel, essentially. And that's a risk for sure, absolutely. We have nurses doing triage with kids, like at the gate before drop off, taking temperatures, listening to their lungs. And we have our facility team going 3 times a day, just sanitizing our entire campus. So I mean, that's one of the big things that we're really trying to posture ourselves as being just a church that wants to help. I talked to Neighborhood, I put out a video and I talked to them about a letter Martin Luther wrote during a plague that came to Wittenberg. And I thought Martin Luther balanced, I know I shouldn't talk about a reformer and an Anabaptist thing, but essentially he said, yeah, I think you should be smart, love your neighbors, shut yourself in, except when a need comes. And then when a need comes, respond to the need. Essentially, he was saying to his friend, I'm not leaving until there's no needs left. And so that's really been our posture at Neighborhood. So again, just quickly, a few things we're doing that have had, I think, significant impact outside of, obviously, what I think we all have to do is just an online Sunday experience. We've taken our counseling services online, so we're doing virtual counseling for people. We have a network set up, people if they have needs and people if they have excess, so that we can take care of needs that way. I'm doing a daily evening kind of fireside chat with our church through Facebook Live and Instagram Live every single night, Monday through Friday. They hear from me for 5 to 10 minutes, just talking about whatever. Last night was really simple. It was St. Patrick's Day, so I just prayed them Patrick's breastplate prayer. And that's had a huge response. People are loving that. Yeah, so we're also doing for families, family fun packs, family fun night packs. It's a drive up, so they can just drive up and one of our staff people will kind of chuck the pack into their car and off they go. So that everybody's doing homeschool right now, right? So it's we're trying to provide resources that way. Yeah, I mean, I think those are some of the big things that we've done and are doing and continuing to learn and evolve. We're also having our staff, we've broken our basically everyone in our database and assigned people names, and their job is every single day to call 5 people and touch base. And not to make this about money, but our executive pastor, his names are our top donors. To remind people that, hey, if they want a church when this thing's over, being generous is still a big deal. Unfortunately, we've already just made the call. A lot of our staff are sort of part-time program only staff. And so we've already made the decision to cut hours and in some cases eliminate some staff positions. We're fortunate. Neighborhood's in a fortunate place. We have, some months in reserve and our budget's fine, but we can already see, we're anticipating we have about 60 to 70% of giving comes automatic online, but that's 30% of our giving that is just frankly probably not going to be coming in. And so obviously those are the other kinds of things. We've also, I think as a church, we're looking at procuring just a line of credit in case we need that, so that we can keep making payroll and different things like that. So anyway, I'm rambling, but those are just some of the things that we're kind of thinking through and talking through and trying to just help people digitally. So we were fortunate in that we do church online every week, so we were sort of set up for that. But yeah, anyway, so if anyone has any questions about any of that, that's sort of some of the things.
That's a great start. Thank you, Forrest. I'm glad I see Bruce Joe sitting right beside you on my screen, and I know he's going to offer to cover payroll for anybody that needs it.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, I don't know. We just don't know. We're already planning on not meeting. The earliest we're planning on meeting would be Mother's Day, but I think that's way too conservative. I think it'll probably be well beyond Mother's Day before we're allowed to meet again in California. So, and we're also, because we might have a stay in place directive, I talked to our state assemblyman and the Department of Health yesterday, and they both said it's not unlikely that our location by the end of the week will have a stay-in-place directive. And so we're already trying to figure out, okay, how do we film? Is there an exemption for nonprofits? Can we sneak in at night and record church and worship? Those kinds of things. So we're working. We've been working hand in hand with our local hospital, the Tulare County, which is our county, the Department of Health, and our state assemblyman on the call with them. I mean, we're on the phone all the time, just making sure we're following the rules and are able, and kind of so that we can get a jump on it and be proactive and make decisions quickly. And I mean, I think it's something like this, you just absolutely don't want to be the last one to make the call. I think we were the first one to make the call in our area to cancel church and move everything digital. We got a lot of pushback from local churches. How can you do that? Don't you trust God? And we said, our attitude's it's not been a matter of faith ever or fear. This is just about being responsible humans. and so we, that's been our approach. This is just the way we can love people right now, is by not being around them. So anyway, that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Very, very helpful. I want to invite others of you either to share what you're doing. Maybe you also just have questions for all of us. Maybe these are issues that some of us either have thought of and have some suggestions for, or we just hadn't even thought of doing something like that. So what are you doing? What kind of questions do you have?
I think a question that I have comes from another lifetime ago experience with doing online teaching. And one of the things that I learned for myself is that I couldn't just take all my face-to-face content and put it online. And so I never did figure that out. I hated online teaching. I never got past figuring out how to take something that's supposed to be incarnational and putting it in another learning environment. And so that's sort of where my head is at, just trying to figure out how do we take something that has been face-to-face and move it online in a way that's not just trying to make the whatever, if it's round peg in a square hole or vice versa. So that's sort of where my main questions are centered at the moment.
And I've got two quick answers to that, but they're not really answers. One is last night we had a class that met for the first time online, and it took a while. The first time we opened it up for conversation, it was pretty quiet, but by the end of the evening, people were pretty active. So one of my suggestions is don't panic immediately when it doesn't, when nothing happens or it doesn't seem like anything is happening. The second comment is that I don't think I have learned to do this very well with online teaching yet either, like you're saying, Audrey, but finding a way to give people a chance to respond. So Forrest, you're talking about what you're giving people. Do you invite responses from people? How do you engage them?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly asking for feedback and want to hear from people and are inviting them to do things. I would say that Neighborhood Church actually grew last Sunday. We had more people engaged with our Sunday morning content than we normally do.
How was that?
Because we told our people to share the link and to say, hey, listen, let's get this everywhere. I think we're learning. I mean, in terms of content, it was so late in the week, we just kind of stuck with our service plan. Now we're shortening everything. I mean, it'll be like a 25-minute sitcom experience for people. But one of the things, I'm not sure, Audrey, that is your name? I feed off a crowd as a communicator. Like I have to have response. Like I just hate. So we are filming with our worship team around so that I can at least have a little bit, like I am actually talking to human beings and I'm not just staring in a camera. It's one of the ways that we're trying to, because I agree with you. I mean, some of the videos that we've already put out, it's just me and a camera and our camera guy, and I hate it so much. But moving forward, all of our content will have at least a small crowd, as long as we can have a small crowd, which again, I think, at least in our area, that those days are probably not gonna be much longer that we can do that.
Thanks, Forrest. Yes, that is Audrey. She's my pastor. So meet Audrey Hines, my pastor.
Hi,
Let's look at the chats. Is there something that you want, anybody that's added something to a chat, you want to say something about it?
I just chatted, and I'd be curious to see other people's thoughts, and I kind of got divided in my chat. But just the thoughts on creating a balance of, do you try to make it sound similar to the normal Sunday service if you're streaming, just to create a constant for people, or make it look different just so it's saying, hey, these are unusual times and this is different? So
I don't know if you're asking me, but yes, we're trying. I mean, last week wasn't, but this week, yes, we've shrunk our stage, given it a more homey vibe. Every week, we're just going to try to be creative with how we do that and how we communicate. But in terms of the content, we're actually sticking with our teaching series. Like, we're in the middle of a teaching series we were calling Long Story Short. We're kind of doing N.T. Wright's 5-act narrative deal, and we're just sticking with it. So, we're in terms of the actual response, we're not using the teaching time for that. We're using separate sort of COVID-19, apocalypse videos to address those needs.
Kurt, you want to break the law? What's up?
I don't want to. I'm in a small town in Kansas where a lot of people are like, this is all blown out. And I'm just, if there's just a little bit of dialogue, what do I say to that? I mean, so we've said we are in a bigger community than just our small town, and we need to play well even in that sandbox. But I've had a little bit of pushback, and it's not serious, but just to say, we're the church and we need to show hope. And does anybody have comments for that? I mean, what does that look like? No, I don't want to break the law.
We just got off of a teleconference or a Zoom conference with the mayor of our city who asked for prayer. And so it's the first time that the ministerial, there are probably 20 of us from town that were on the phone together for prayer. First time we've gone, online for our meetings, which we'll probably do for April. So it's a pretty active ministerial. There's a number of denominational people who are responding to, hierarchy, that shut them down, Seventh-day Adventists, and others like that. But then there's also a lot of independents, and our independents over here are primarily Pentecostal. And so, 2 churches run healing rooms. And both of those churches are saying, we are not shutting our healing rooms down on account of, a cause for healing. So, most of us are saying, oh, good for you. That's great. And, people come in individually and stuff. But one of them said that they're planning a special healing service. And he says, man, if we get 50 or 500 or 5,000 coming, he says, we're just going for it. We're going to call this. And it was quiet. Other pastors didn't say a thing because we're a little bit like, well, that's different than, than just hosting your regular healing session. So I would say we probably have out of Dinuba, 25 churches, 2 of them are kind of operating in that fly in the face of the government. Hey, we're going to do this. We have a new community strategist we just hired. So she's sitting in her office over there right now saying, we've got to ramp up all this online stuff, and how are we going to help, and in contact with, the food pantry across the street, and where are they're moving to a drive-by only. So, how do we get volunteers to help with that? We were at Gleanings for the Hungry, helping them pack up stuff to send out. So, it's small teams of people that are kind of working together, but anyway, it's a great challenge, and our church has been on the radio. Yeah, they still have radios, but we are now moving with Forrest. I mean, we're a little bit behind, but yeah, we're moving to go streaming online. And we're gonna have to set up a different stage. The choir's been canceled, church has been canceled, you know, those kind of things. So, yeah, I mean, our hospital, Quia Delta in Visalia, is already overwhelmed. They were overwhelmed when I was in the hospital recently. And this is not helping. They've got a lady dying of this in ICU from our town in Dinuba. So yeah, I think our county is probably correct in saying we're probably going to go to a shelter-in-place order like the Bay Area is, just so this thing doesn't spread, because there's nothing they can do. I've got a fellow dying in a hospital in Fresno. I can't go see him. Only his wife can see him. His daughters can't. And so, you know, helping people, it's mainly texting and phone calls to kind of help people, you know, touch through a phone. It's a challenge these days, just to live life and go through the normal things. There probably won't be a funeral service that people will come to. And, you know, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there.
Thank you, Mark. That's really, really helpful. Kurt, I noticed early on the comment that we're not doing this for ourselves, this staying at home. We're doing this as an act of love for other people. It's loving our neighbor, and that's what my doctor tells me too. So I think that'd be a good response to give people. Lots of fabulous stuff that's coming in on the chat. Thank you for that. Anybody want to say more? Jana, you're asking about FaceTime. Dave, you're asking about care for people that need a presence. Really, it's the people that are in nursing homes, and that's one of those areas that's really tough, because we're trying to protect those people by not going to see them, and yet they probably are least likely to understand a phone call or some other kind of media presentation. Bruce, do you want to speak up for MB Foundation?
Yeah, you bet. Two things in response to Don, before I get to Don's question about lending solutions. Just want to say that we've got an online giving solution. So if your church doesn't have online giving capabilities yet, we could get you set up for that pretty quick. In fact, I'll post the link to the form that I would need completed for that. Which is there. So if you fill that out and emailed it back to me, we could get you set up and then get you a link that would be unique for your church and get you set up. There's my email address on that. So that might be one option. Reminding, we've been talking a lot about around here about, you know, reminding your church parishioners, generosity is still needed, kind of like what Forrest was saying, and there's staff salaries to pay, there's ministry to be done, and so thinking of ways of reminding them that it's also an act of worship. So let's keep worshiping. Giving is a way of worshiping. So maybe making that a part of your online services is one thing that comes to mind for me, of just having that reminder. The loan thing is going to be a little bit more challenging for us. What are our solutions that we can offer? We've always been in a position of being a partner, so trying to help whatever you might need in that, but we also, in this situation, have to really dig in, which we're doing. Man, what can we afford? What can we manage? What can we do? So lines of credit, I think we're open to exploring that with you. Payment modifications, we're open to exploring that with you, and just trying to see what's the right balance. So those would be my thoughts right off the bat.
Yeah, that's
Bruce,
great. Thank you.
This is Tim Sullivan. Just a question about, obviously the markets are probably going to affect the foundation's bottom line and potentially capacity to do loans. So, you know, just for all of us to be aware that the foundation doesn't sit untouched from some fairly dramatic kinds of financial realities as well, that may be a limiting factor. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. That's part of the analysis that I think we got to figure out. Of course, the unknown, the uncertainty makes that more challenging to try and figure out, but that's a good reminder. I will say we have made a shift on our interest rates, so if you do have a loan with us, you'll be getting some notice about that. If you have a variable loan, that variable loan rate is going down effective April 1. We also then have to lower our certificate investment rates as well. That goes in effect May 1, but we're getting the notices out to our borrowers, investors on that, but trying to provide some relief to our borrowers in that way too.
I talked to one of my students yesterday. He's planning a church. I think they've had 3 or 4 weeks of meetings. So talk about a challenge. Whew.
Hey, Lynn, Galen Weiss here, Multiply. Let me jump in really quick. Just got off of a meeting this morning, and one of the ways that Multiply wants to help resource all of you is we're putting together they're going to be a Zoom, like a 1-hour Zoom call, multiple times per week, helping families think through what we're calling as multiplying faith stories sessions. So it would be getting some of our national leaders, our regional missionaries to come online and talk about how our international, our global church has dealt with living through a crisis and suffering, and some of the lessons we can learn from their story. So we'll be sending you some links on that. And it would be a way that families at home could go online and listen to stories and just hear about how God is at work. And then there'll be some interactive time to say, okay, what are we learning from their experience that we can maybe put into practice in our own community environment. So that's one. The other one is we're doing an online equipping platform for missional communities. Andy Owen and a team is working on that. So they're kind of dealing with, hey, how do we, like when we can't meet together, how do we continue to reach out into our community? What are some ways that we can do that? And so we'll be sending that link out hopefully by the beginning of next week. And we just want you to know that we're in the game with you guys. Our long-term missionaries are staying on the field. Yesterday, we just made a decision to bring home all of our Trek teams. So they'll be coming back. But very much involved in what God is opening the doors. I think these are great times of opportunities for us to say, Lord, how are you inviting us to minister to people in our communities? And I think that we're going to see some incredible things happen as we walk by faith.
Thanks,
I'm wondering if Jason Queering and Phil Weeb might be able to talk a little bit about the unique opportunity to engage with the LDS community that's not meeting for the first time in like forever. And so as people are not meeting in Mormon churches, they're going to be looking for online opportunities, maybe for things about, hope. And what are you guys doing? Do you have anything special in mind thinking about that, here and now we have an opportunity to perhaps communicate with people we never would previous to this?
Jason, are you going to say something?
Sure. Here we are. So if you hear my family in the background, everybody's doing homeschooling today. Today's the first day of going online classes. So yeah, that's been interesting. Plus, we woke up this morning to an earthquake, and so Salt Lake had its biggest earthquake in like 20-30 years. So yeah, I mean, big shake up here with the LDS Church worldwide not meeting for the first time in, I can't even tell you the last time. So it's honestly, I have more questions than answers because we are all we're not on full lockdown, but people are taking the social distancing pretty seriously. And so I honestly, I have probably more questions than answers on that. We're really encouraging our people to focus on being the church and not just the X's and O's of doing church. And yeah, we're going to make sure that we're having teaching, and we're going to be working on trying to connect as a community online and just, interpersonally as however we can. But we're really trying to encourage our people to be the church in our communities and just check in on their neighbors and things like that. So if you notice, Utah has a very unique preparedness or prepper culture. And I just saw a diagram this morning that Utah grocery shopping has gone up 250% since this began. The next highest is Montana with like 90-something%. And so kind of unique dynamics there. People who characteristically have 2 years food storage already are also just ransacking the stores. So we're going to try to support some of the community efforts to just get people connected with groceries and needs with things like that. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at, just trying to figure out what that looks like. So Phil or Drew, if you guys want to kick in there too, that'd be great.
I think you just said the piece of making sure we're really considering our online presence in Utah, because the LDS Church at least does not have any online presence. So we try to stay open, and we were open last Sunday, and we had a bunch of LDS people come to church, which was pretty cool. But that's not our circumstance anymore. So I would say, not just, I look at it as a neat opportunity. The doors of the church building are closed, so the battlefield has moved outside. So it's a new way to fish, right? You know, how are you connecting with people? How are you meeting where they're at? I think when, you know, the decision of whether we stay open or not was taken away from us, then you go, okay, cool. It's a new challenge. How do I face this? I'm not going to let Satan win, right? Let's go ahead and figure out how we're reaching people where they're at. And, you know, some of you guys were mentioned where you got folks who aren't in the digital age. You know, there's always a consideration of maybe bringing them an iPad or an old phone that they could watch something on. That's not a solution or what you should do. It's just an idea, thinking out loud. But we have found that even our older folks in our community are responding really well to the idea. And we just have really shared that, you know, being cautious is proactive, having fear is reactive. So, you know, we'd rather be proactive with what we're doing. And I think in the LDS community it's actually better for us, I think, than almost everybody else, because we have a whole bunch of people who want to go to church, and the church they go to has nothing for them at all, period. So it's a bigger win for us to have an online presence, I think, than most communities, just because all of our neighbors want something from their church and they're not getting it. So we're just making sure we have a really good presence, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We're trying to hit them all. And we're utilizing Zoom as well for our small groups. So you can, hopefully by the end of tomorrow, you'll be able to go to our website and click on a link and join a small group any night of the week that either myself or one of our leaders is doing. And it's just discussion based like this.
Don, let me ask you a quick question, and then Forrest get back into it. But Don, do we have any conference-wide resources for helping people ramp up their online stuff?
For ramping up their online, if they aren't already with an online presence.
Whatever media I meant,
Yeah.
not online particularly. But
I think if they're just developing some of that, we have some people on our staff that'd be more than happy to help them to get going.
So who would they contact?
J.L. Martin would be the person to contact.
Okay. Thank you.
And socialmedia.usmb.org would be his address.
Okay, thank you. Forrest, sorry I interrupted you.
Did you? I didn't
I thought your mic went, I thought you unmuted.
No, I mean, I would say one of the other things we're trying, when we haven't started yet, but we just asked for feedback from people if they would be open to this, is like online book clubs. So we've moved all of our small groups online, but I just reached out and said, hey, would be interested. There's a book out there called Raising Disciples. It's just a really easy read, written by a staff member up at the Meeting House in Canada. And man, massive flood of yes. And again, for me as the lead pastor, it's a way to stay connected to people and use the Zoom platform and just have conversations. And so also, I forgot to mention our student ministries moved online. And so they're actually putting together short devotionals, then a link to a Zoom room where they can interact with kids a couple times a week. And I think that that's really important. And that's easy. Those kids live online. That's their home. So, so anyway, the book club idea is so easy, right? It's just so easy, but it's like a great way to stay connected with people and help them grow. And yeah, we've really been pushing back against the sort of, I don't know, the message I hear out there a lot, like, it's not, you know, Christians don't fear, you know, like, just come on. So we have been pushing back against that and saying, lean into your fear, but don't let it sort of be the boss of you, but be honest about it. How can we, you know, sort of Pete Scazzaro, be emotionally healthy in this, and be honest about sort of the dark night, and help people walk through it and actually grow through loss and grow through grief and crisis. And so anyway, I think that's been definitely our posture and attitude, but we've definitely pushed hard against, like, do not listen to people that tell you you cannot be afraid and faithful at the same time. Like, those two things can coexist. And so, but let's talk about it. Let's be honest about our feelings and emotions and lean in. So.
May I just jump in here? Forrest, I think what you just said is really powerful. How do we engage our own colleagues in ministry to a different kind of language? And so this has been a challenge for us in the Hispanic churches, because we do come at this from a spirit of, you know, fear, and to educate and to walk along and to reevaluate with folks who have not understood that part, or have not even functioned in that way, has been difficulty. But we did the same thing. So we canceled church just like you did, and we had pushback from other Hispanic churches, and, you know, they were like, no, we're not canceling. And obviously this week, we don't have a choice. Like, this is what's happening, period. But I just want to say a couple of other pieces. One is, we do have a digital challenge among Hispanic communities. So most of our pastors don't have access to online pieces. And just a reminder that 31% of the households in the US don't have internet at home. So that becomes another part that is outside of the scope of where we want to do ministry. And how do we minister to those individuals who are not able to go to a McDonald's or a Starbucks and just jump online like they would have done in a normal space? Phone calls are still kind of very old-fashioned, but it functions. And to those who have Facebook and who have resources like that, like, there's such a diversity of ways, but not one of them meets all the needs. And how are we diversifying all of the ways in which we're doing ministry? And then I just keep thinking about this high poverty space of people in our community, the elderly especially, who are more vulnerable in terms of mobility back and forth. What are folks doing with the elderly in their community, or those outside of your community, but who are going to be hit by this piece?
You know, I'd actually love to hear. So we do Spanish translation at Neighborhood, and we're actually working on, since we're pre-recording and not live, it's a little more challenging. And so we're pre-recording the teaching content, and then having one of our translators come in and sort of watch me before Sunday and translate it, and then putting the audio sort of over that. We don't know if it's going to work yet, but I mean, that's kind of what we're hoping to do, so that our friends that rely on our Spanish translation can still at least have some sort of access to that. We don't know yet. We haven't quite figured out, because we're not doing it live. Usually it's a call-in with headphones. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts for us as we continue to connect to the Spanish-speaking community in Visalia, because yeah, I think the numbers for us in Visalia in Tulare County is like over 30% are Spanish only inside their home. And so that's been very real for us as we've tried to figure out, okay, how do we reach that? So right now, this is our plan. We're trying to figure it out, but that's anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think Mark Isaac just shared a resource that we all, I think you're familiar with because Maria was part of your church community for a while. But Maria is one resource. There's plenty of others, so we could even touch bases later and figure this piece out. But I keep thinking about those who still are challenged in terms of digital, like what and yeah, no internet at home. So what does that look like? How do we do that piece?
Dina, we've just learned, because we just bought a Zoom account for figuring out how to do this. And so we just learned that, of course, there's a call-in feature of this that's, I think, limited with a free Zoom account, but I think there's better access for calling in with a paid account. So we're doing a little meet and greet on Thursday for especially our older folks for whom this is all really new, so that they can fiddle around with settings and call us if they have questions. But one of the features is you can also call this number and participate that way. So at least at this point, that's the only thing that I'm aware of for people that are limited as far as the digital access, is that they can call in on those Zoom calls.
Also, though, Audrey, you had suggested for us, we are making phone calls and we've prioritized those who are 60 plus and single in our congregation, knowing that they're the most isolated right now. And so on. And I had a phone call with a woman in our congregation yesterday, and no one's called me for 3 weeks. I'm in tears that you're calling right now, and was so happy to have the conversation and the human connection. And so as a millennial, that, I go, we don't use this for that. Like, it's not what that's for, but that's, stepping out of my comfort zone to reach into a comfort zone for those who are less digitally connected. She doesn't even have email. So as Audrey mentioned in the comments, she's one that will be sending physical copies of our digital emails that are going out to make her feel connected in that way. But personal phone calls, as much as we can. I know it's probably harder for the larger your congregation is, but it feels a little bit overwhelming even with just over 100 for us. So
Yeah, I would say until there's a stand and stay where you are directive, we're just still going to. We have nurses who have volunteered to just show up at some of our the most at risk of our neighborhood's a pretty young church, but we definitely have people that are old and single and alone. And so we've just been knocking on doors still and just making sure they're still there and still doing okay. And if we can do anything, we want to help them pick up groceries, those kinds of things. Again, that it's pretty manageable, but still we want them to know we care for them. But yeah, we're still knocking on doors of people that are like 70 and over, and we know that are alone.
We just mentioned a little bit as a MB family, just like this event, it's a way we can rally together and pray for one another. And I would like to ask specifically, we do have a lot of diasporic groups that have just come to our country, and they have very limited resources and barely making rent payments on little places of worship. So I'm sure they're reeling right now, and we're going to be talking about that actually tomorrow. So those kinds of things, those are things we can lift up to the Lord in prayer for one another. And feel free to share those on Facebook and websites and all that kind of stuff, because we need each other.
Dwight, what did you have in mind with your question?
Yeah, I was just curious if any of you guys, we've got about 5 or 6 healthcare workers that are working front lines in the hospitals and doctors' offices. And, I know they're overwhelmed and tired. I'm just curious, are any of you guys doing anything special to minister to them, to try to come alongside them, or just ideas on that?
Again, I think I mentioned earlier, we're actually providing childcare for first responders and medical workers, and that was something kind of dicey though. We worked hand in hand with our county's Department of Health and our local hospital to make sure we were like doing everything we could. But they were so stoked. Our hospital actually sent the registration out to every one of the people on their staff. And some of the other local kind of rural healthcare clinics sent it out. The local ambulance company sent it out. And so we've gotten a lot of, fire, doctors, nurses, those kinds of things. So right now they're at our church. I actually live within I'm immune compromised sort of 24/7. And so I'm working from home these days mostly, except when I go in to film a video. But right now on our campus is, lots of little munchkins. So
I was going to mention, Stephen, you have a prayer team going right now. You want to talk about that?
Once a month, a group has been praying for the convention that's coming up this summer. There's just some really special opportunities for renewal this year. And so expanding that is certainly a possibility, but I don't know what more you want me to say about that. I mean, not just expanding it, but even just meeting more frequently. I was thinking just as this started, Dawn, how just meeting together regularly to check in and pray with each other is just a really rich thing to do. So I would certainly encourage it. And then there's some, I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but Zoom can be set up with this breakout room option. It's just a toggle. So you can start like this, and then you can move into smaller groups of whatever size you want. And so you can come together, and then you can break in smaller groups, come back. I mean, that's what we do in that prayer meeting. And it's, it's just good. I would hope that things like this would continue to happen, even if we return to normal in a couple months. This is just good. I'm not for returning to normal, by the way, but that's a separate conversation.
So some feedback on that. Do we want to try to put together something like this once a week and share a little bit what's going on, updates, and pray?
No, I mean, I like it, but I don't think people should feel like, oh, I got to do this weekly meeting. It's like, if you're feeling it in your heart and I need some connection, jump in. And if not, you can let it pass until the next time it comes around.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to open again at this time in a week, and we may, as fast as things have been changing. One night last week, I went to bed and I thought when I woke up, or I think maybe somebody else mentioned it, I think a year went by overnight in terms of the amount of changes that were happening. Maybe it was my pastor that told me that, but I think perhaps meeting again in a week and without any sense of obligation. So I'm happy to open things up, and if it turns into mostly a prayer time in breakout groups, that'd be a fine way to spend our time.
Then I'd also love to hear and maybe we could do this for next week since it's kind of wrapping up the hour. I'd love to hear what people are thinking about Easter and what they're going to do and how they're going to get creative about their Easter services. I mean, they're not going to happen. So live anyway, at least in where we are. So, right now, that's a big conversation behind the scenes for us. And so
I guess no Easter bunny this year.
No Easter bunny this year. So yeah, we've kind of got a running Google Doc with our staff as people are throwing in ideas and so we try to figure it out. But anyway, I'd love to talk about that next week. I'd love for people just to share what they're thinking, because I don't know about you. I still think Jesus rose from the dead, COVID-19 or not. And so I still want to help people really celebrate that well and how we can help them do that. So anyway, that's just a food for thought for maybe next week.
Great idea. Yeah.
In particular, how would you handle baptisms? Because we have a number that we're getting ready for, and we're thinking, do we put that online, and do we get people together and families? We may punt baptisms too.
How about a drive-in? Use your parking lot, go on FM or whatever. They used to do that.
We thought about it. It's just we don't have for neighborhood. We have a little bit of a unique environment in our parking lots. This weird, like we don't have the space for it. But I know there's actually a church in the town next to us that is their plan right now. They're going to set up a stage sort of on the front end. They have like one square. They have just like a rectangle. And they're going to put a stage on the end and kind of do it. I don't know if that's going to be allowed come Easter, but right now it is allowed. So they're planning on it. And I thought, wow, that's a great idea. We actually looked into it for about 5 seconds. Thought, it's not going to work for us, but I love that idea. Yeah.
The old glass cathedral, they did it.
This is Stephen here in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm part of a small church. I'm the pastor here. About 100 people that would call this their home church, but probably only about 50 to 60 on average in attendance. And God has given me a passion for evangelism and shepherding and caring for people. But my passion is really not preaching. I do it. People tell me I do a good job. The idea of not having to preach for several months is fantastic as far as I'm concerned. And so maybe just kind of a question, to what extent with so many great online capabilities, we only have audio here. Can I just kind of shepherd my people through this and encourage them to connect with other places for good biblical teaching? Or to what extent do I still need to be kind of that every week a solid message? Boy, to give more of my time for shepherding and encouragement and not having to spend all the hours every week putting a message together, it sounds great to me. Any feedback on that?
Even I'm going to just really stick myself out here a little bit in front of all these preachers. I think you have a great heart, and I think you should just do what you just said and loving your people. That's like preacher blasphemy, what you just said about not loving preaching, and like everybody's whole lives are designed around that. And my goodness, brother, you just keep doing what you're doing.
Just a perspective from me, I think what Stephen, you're in what you said helped me coalesce something in my own mind, that for those of us who are preaching, and I'm a small church in Topeka, Kansas, I'm still going to be preaching. That's something that I enjoy doing, and that's something that I'm going to enjoy engaging with in this season. But you're right, there are a ton of people on YouTube that are better preachers than I am, and what that reminds me of is that I need to be preaching to my people in my location, because that's just frankly the only way I can differentiate myself from the great teaching that they can get elsewhere. We can't be physically incarnational, meeting together, but if we are going to preach, if we are going to engage that way, making sure I am preaching to my location, to where I'm at, so that I'm not just, one option among many thousands that have more skill or more talent or more whatever. But even the difference in between our gifts, that's helpful. You kind of brought something to my mind, so thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'm certainly not trying to insult anybody whose gift is preaching, but like leverage your gifts. Like if you're a shepherd, then do that. And if there's somebody even in your church, again, this is preacher blasphemy, right? This is like how we do church blasphemy. If there's somebody who preaches better than you, then empower them to do it, right? If you're all about so maybe some of this is really easy for me to say because I don't have a title of pastor right now. I'm pastoral, but I'm not in the same boat that you guys are. I'm full of all kinds of great ideas right now that are impossible sounding to you because of what you're dealing with.
Okay.
I love you anyways.
Jana, are you still there?
I imagine she had to run because she's got Board of Faith and Life meeting. that she's doing.
Okay, fine. So Dina, I'm going to ask you if you could conclude our time with prayer. Would you do that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And just maybe, yeah, go for it, Glenn.
Before you do, Ben, do you feel comfortable about saying anything about Caitlin? Maybe this isn't an appropriate place, I don't know, but whatever you feel okay about sharing.
Sure, I can share for a few seconds. Many of you know my wife, Caitlin, formerly Baird, now Friesen. As of 3 years ago, she struggles with heart issues and is in the pre-transplant process. She has been struggling with unrelated issues, we have found out, for the last 3 months, and finally has some resolution. Her gallbladder is on the fritz. And so we are grateful for actual news that we know what's going on finally. And there will be a surgery at some point in the future to remove it, and God willing, get her back to a more normal season of non-nausea most days. She's had to step way far back. So anyways, if you want to pray for her and pray for us so that we can figure out when, where, and how to get that gallbladder surgery. It is not nearly as impactful as some of the things going on in our country right now, but it's something that's been meaningful to us. So thanks, Lynn. If you guys would keep us in prayers to, again, lower down the list than some of the other things, but it's been a part of our lives.
Hey, it's her life and our life together. Dina, I don't know what you were going to say. Go ahead and do that. And then if you could kind of conclude our time with a benediction of prayer.
Perfect. I just want to say what a great space for us to come together in this critical time. Thank you all, honestly, for your contributions. My only final thought here would be, just as I was hearing Galen speak about the global church, I'm reminded that sometimes the global church is also affected by our language. And even as folks identify this as a Chinese virus, that is very hurtful. It's very unsettling, and we are called to love each other. And so this language is really unacceptable in the body of Christ. And so let's remove that from our any spaces where that might be repeated. But I just want to say, this is what the body of Christ gets to do, is we get to call out to God together. So let's do that. Lord, thank you, as we are in different spaces across this land, as we are in different situations, some of us in large churches, some of us in small churches, some of us in dual, bilingual, trilingual churches, some of us in monolingual, in all kinds of financial differences. Lord, you are the God that we call upon. And Lord, I pray that those who are experiencing anxiety and stress and fear, that you would be the God that brings calmness, and that your spirit would bring even comfort and Lord, that people would feel safe and secure in you and in the faith community. Lord, I pray for those who are experiencing illness, sickness, Lord, whether it's corona or whether it's anything else, that you would become the God that heals, the God that heals physically. Lord, for folks who are experiencing economic challenges, who are losing their jobs, who are having to struggle with how they're going to meet rent or anything for the next even 2 weeks. Lord, be the God that provides, and mobilize your church to provide. And Lord, I pray that those who are in challenging situations on what to do with elderly family members or whatever, that you would be the God that provides wisdom, and give us wisdom as the body of Christ together, that we continue to lean into each other and to uplift you. May you, Lord, be lifted up even in these times. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Oh, great encouragement. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And again, we'll offer this time next week for those of you who are interested. Blessings as you go into ministry.